focus on breaking down risk management problems bit by bit until we find a solution. If you would like to discuss anything you hear on GPP with us, please reach out using the links in the description. Enjoy today's episode.
Welcome, Ryan, to the show. Excited to have you.
Thanks, brother.
Ryan Deeds, not Ryan Brock, right?
That's right. There are two Ryans. There's Ryan Squared today, right? That's what we got.
That's right.
We'll keep it simple.
Yeah.
One of us has less hair problems than the other, I would say.
Yeah, if you're watching on video, there's a very clear distinction, no doubt.
One's young and good looking with spectacles. The other is old and battered and wise, I would say.
There we go.
More life experience.
That's right.
That reminds me, I saw I can't remember the talk show, but John Cena and Hugh Jackman are on it, and they have to trash talk, but only say nice things. They call it reverse trash talking.
I've seen those.
It is hilarious.
Yeah.
You got to watch that again. But I'm excited for this conversation today because I think there's a couple different lenses we can look at it. Ryan, you've obviously been working in leadership positions in agencies, as well as then transitioning to the InsurTech side, where you're able to, use data in a lot of decision-making processes and how you're doing that and what insights you're seeing there. So I think it's going to be really fun to kind of see how this all comes together and get your perspective on how advisors can help their clients in the industry. And so would you start, just give everybody an idea of what Ennabl is, who you are, what your background is, and then we'll kind of jump in.
Sure, absolutely. So long ago, I worked at a Tropicana orange juice. I was working there before I got invited into an agency. 2002, came over to that insurance agency. They had some data problems. I ended up staying there for 10 years, moved to another agency, worked with data and technology and leadership and culture, because really so much of the stuff that we try to accomplish at the desk takes a lot of culture in the organization. And, those firms were all really making a transition. We went through this whole trusted advisor kind of thing, right? Like, how do we become trusted advisors? And then I went to Assurex, where, some of the most premier insurance agencies in America and internationally exist, and seeing how they help control that perception, the things that they do out there. I worked for them for a couple of years before getting invited to join Ennabl. And Ennabl is a company that works with agencies, insurance agencies specifically, to get value out of their data, and really tries to provide parity to the large shops that are using data to value today in very innovative ways at a decent price point and at much less work than it would take to get there. And so that's us in a kind of short and sweet synopsis, but that it's been an interesting journey to go through the process of the insurance agency space and then come over to software. So it's been cool.
I bet. And I know that the product and the service you guys are putting together is pretty awesome. If anybody's out there and hasn't learned what Ennabl is doing, I would certainly encourage it. But some of
your questions, if you have questions about data and its relevancy and how you can use it or not, give me a holler. Ryan Deeds on LinkedIn, Ryan@Ennabl.com. And we can chit chat all day about data and insurance, because that's what I do.
Totally, yeah.
Well, you never need any, the data that's in the risk management industry is so prevalent. I don't know why you'd ever get a call, Ryan.
Yeah, that's right. Never at all.
It's all organized and everyone knows where they're at,
Super clean, very clean. Yeah.
So you were talking to us before we jumped on, Ryan, about kind of an example you had of getting from that product to that trusted advisor approach. Maybe give everybody an idea of that story and what you took out of that. And
it was awesome. So there was a young producer, hungry as hell, right? Came from poverty, and you start learning what to look for in producers over time, right? But came from broke as hell, got an opportunity to be a producer at the Crichton Group, and was 25, 26, and he was a benefits producer. So, and he's looking for ends, training and onboarding in most places is not it's not great, right? It's not a wonderful fit. So you're having to learn a lot on your own. Well, he was like, he got a lead, a petroleum company lead. And what that, really they're talking about distribution centers. So, they're talking about the little stop and goes all around the place that have the gas pumps. So he ends up setting a meeting, and everybody in the agency is super excited because this 25-year-old set this meeting with this large company. We're in Nashville, and there's a bunch of petroleum companies there. Well, he goes into there and he's pitching, and he's, he really just kind of spinning his wheels because he doesn't know anything about the industry. He didn't take the time to learn. He didn't have the time to learn. He just got this prospect. And they asked him a question that fundamentally changes his whole career. One question. They said, "How does your product help us with slippage?" And he said, "I don't even know what the hell slippage is." And for those that don't know, slippage is employee theft. So he gets his ass kicked in that meeting, comes home, tail between his legs and just sad. But he's like, you know what? I'm going to study on this. So he did. He started studying on that. He found white papers that showed how enhanced employee benefits created an incentive for employees to not steal, right? That where employee benefits were better, that they would have less slippage in those organizations. So he spends like a month getting this presentation ready, really talking about this fundamental issue that these clients are worried about. Gets another meeting lined up, goes in there and absolutely crushes it. Signs like 150,000 revenue account. Like it was and the guy had nothing on the books, like brand new. And he did that by specifically addressing slippage,
Yeah.
And so he was able to take that lesson and translate into where he was really going out as the quote and pray kind of person, right? To translate it into business speak, to say, our product helps your bottom line this way. The more you buy of our product up to a certain amount helps your problem this much. And then he just started setting meetings with petroleum companies all around. 3 years, the guy had a $900,000 book. He became a partner at the agency, got bought in at 3%. And then they got bought by Hub, valued at like $50 freaking million, And wow. It was an amazing story to be able to show how he took that one ass kicking, turn that around, conceptually apply the lesson learned there, and just go and really destroy it. And then he was looking for other kind of wedges, right? Anything that would get him a conversation on different industries. But that always brought a lot of joy, as he talked through that experience and that learning, because oftentimes I think we talk about becoming advisors, but you have to have pipeline to be an advisor. You have to have the space, you have to have the at bats, there's a lot of things you have to do where you're not just out there slinging, and you have to have a corporate culture that incentivizes that too, right? I mean, it's not just one element, but that was a very microcosm of exactly how I've seen the best producers and advisors become that, right? They tie the product to the problem in the industry that they're facing, and then they can really tie it into how it helps them over a long-term relationship. And that was what worked. I mean, that's what I've seen many producers do over time, and agencies as they transition out of the quote and pray world over into that advisory world, because niches are more profitable. It's the verticalization is the future for small for agencies of any, I think, of not just insurance, for anything, right? We want to go to specialists, we want to go to experts. And so as you build that vertical out, I think it's important as hell to understand all the components of it.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome. One thing I was going to follow up on that, I mean, there's a lot in there that we can pull out, right? It's solving problems. Which I do totally agree with you. If we can't find a problem, we can't bring value. But when we get to the niche conversation, and we just had a past episode where we had this similar conversation, I think many people, that's a buzzword right now. Should niche, you should niche, right?
Right.
Some people try to, though, force the niche where it's like, oh, I want to go after these guys. That's all I'm going to do, build it out. And they go out and they realize that business plan they built for that niche was completely off base. and they spent all this time preparing and they should have just gone out and did it. Whereas we hear so many times the success story is like that. Somebody just went out and got an opportunity on a piece of business, found a problem that many of those businesses had, and went and solved that problem for many people. And oh, by the way, created a niche in the process.
Well,
So,
I think
curious your thoughts on the path.
yeah, you've got to like. I mean, I agree with you. A niche is a buzzword, and I think saturation of volume in a specific industry and a strategic niche are two very different things, right? We can have a saturation of volume in an industry that we may not even want that risk. We may not want that kind of business, right? But it's just kind of happened organically. A niche, a strategic niche to me is something that you can have an articulated value proposition. Why do you do business with us? What can we do better than anybody else? How do we understand that business? In the insurance world, what programs do you have with carriers? What expertise can you bring to that? And I really think it's interesting as you look at when you're deciding to pick the vertical. I like to understand. I kind of like the model that you said initially, right? Because it's two different ways. The one is I'm a person trying to get some sales and trying to build something. The other is I'm an agency that understands that we have a good offering for this vertical, and we're willing to take a pounding over the next 2 or 3 years as we perfect that message, right? I mean, because oftentimes what we thought was going to be the message, like you said, doesn't resonate as effectively, and we need to either adjust and be flexible enough to adjust that. But I like when you can actually look at, and you have a message, you have the staff, you have the stuff, you say, I'm going after this. I also think you have to use data in that realm to be able to say, okay, we've gone after 100. We've used this messaging. We've succeeded 12 times. So that means that we have 12%, now we have 12 clients. For us to get to 100 clients means we're gonna have to do this X number of times. The math, you can kind of do the math, right? And see if that's scalable or not and what you need to adjust. So I think you have to always be looking at it with multiple lenses. Is it a strategic initiative of an organization to go into that vertical? If it is it just because they have volume there, or do they actually have articulated value? Like, that's why core personal lines, I have a problem with agencies that really focus solely on core personal lines, because what is the value proposition an independent agent can bring to that when speed and convenience are the two things that core personal lines care about? Inversely, you take high net worth. High net worth is a great niche to go into for an independent agent because we can do concierge service. We can make it easier to do business with your wealth managers. We can kind of circle in the 401k and the investment folks together, where and the premiums are a little higher. So the but I think it's being strategic about sitting down, identifying, do we have a true value proposition for this? Or are we just going to fall on, hey, we're good at service, and you got to be very careful with it.
Yeah. Service is table stakes, as we like to say. I mean,
it is.
It's hard to be in business anymore if you don't have decent service, right? It's not a value proposition.
You don't lose clients because of bad. I mean, if you do lose clients because of bad service, you end up firing the person that serviced them. And that doesn't happen very often, right? You lose clients because of M&A, you lose client. There's a million other reasons. But service in an insurance agency, when you look at the retention, it's very, very, that doesn't happen a whole lot. It's just not I think people want it to, because I think it's such a easy, we have the best service ever. Yeah. But legitimately, if an account manager or a producer yells at a client, loses 2 clients, they're not going to be a producer for very long. They're not going to be an account manager very long, right?
Yeah. Oh, it's so true. I mean, I am forever amazed in our industry. We talk to somebody and they're like, well, I can't get my agent on the phone, I can't get a certificate of insurance, but that's very rare. It still amazes me, right, when it happens. But
well, that's why I think, when you roll in, like, because I think everything gets convoluted, right? So we talk about niches and we talk about having an articulated value proposition, but it almost sounds like customer experience, right? We know the customer, we know what they need, we're going to bring that to them. And so there's a lot of overlap and crossover in some of these terminologies. You've got to have a good customer experience. Now, that doesn't mean it's an app. It depends on who that customer is, what that vertical is. What does that value look like to that? And a lot of times it's just you and the executive team or producers sitting around the room drinking some beers talking about it. What can we do for trucking? What can we do for garbage haulers? What can we do for barbershops? Is there anything there? And so, but I love being a part of those because the energy that comes out is kind of fun,
Yeah.
I do too. There's so many areas to create experiences in our industry.
Right.
That, I mean, nobody's doing it, to a point where you can really separate yourself and somebody has you don't hear about wowing experiences in the news in the risk management industry.
Right.
So, they're not studying that in school, like Starbucks or who's the hotel, Ritz, right? Like they're
Chick-fil-A, right? They're not like
Yeah.
doing all the studies, right?
There's so much room to sit together and try to figure out, like, you take high net worth personal lines. I mean, you could, and what's interesting is that other industries like banking, they will bet over a 150-year period and invest in it over a 150-year period. And the math's completely different, and they're willing to play that long game and invest significant dollars into a private client and what that means, and giving them discount on long-term rates and all the stuff that they do because they understand the value of that client. I think that's something that we also miss while we're trying to balance this. If we can go find a niche, if we can bring value, add the client experience, like, is it worth it? And how do we calculate the cost of acquiring that client then and all of that stuff? It's still pretty convoluted yet.
And you have to have long-term vision though, right? I mean, because I remember, and again, I've been in the game for a while, so I'm going to date myself, but so we're sitting in 2005, we're in Lakeland, Florida, we're in a $9 million firm, I think it's 2008, and we're talking about niching. And what people would say is, oh, we don't want to pigeonhole ourselves, right? They were so freaked out by saying, hey, we have an aviation department, that would preclude other people from coming to us for some other problem, right? And I think that you have to have a long-term vision where, like at Crichton, we had a $2.5 million revenue social services book of business, which was significant. But what that client, when that prospect called our group would be able to pick up the phone and be like, okay, who are you? What are you? Where are you? Okay, well, here's the 14 areas that you really probably should be looking at. Here's the things that are really concerning. Here's what you've done a good job with. And that right there is the core of being a consultant, right? That is a consultative kind of relationship where that person calls in, you already have a fundamental understanding of what they're going to go through in that business, which makes them feel better about doing business with you. But it takes time, it takes energy, it takes effort, it takes failure, it takes money. So we had a $2.5 million book at Crichton that it was great for the client and the prospect. They'd call in, they would know the problem, they can staff for that effectively. It's way more profitable, but it doesn't happen in 1 year or 2 years or even 3 years. You got to be forward thinking about that and really be looking outward to determine, hey, and use metrics to judge. Are we growing at this percentage and is it working? And I mean, do we need to change things up? It's not like you can set it and forget it. I mean, these are purposeful investments of time and energy that you're making to grow that,
Did that book come out of, like, did a producer or two, naturally grow that, or did the firm say, we feel like we can build a value prop in social services? You built the value prop and then you went out and targeted.
No, it happened the other way. And I think originally that's really how it happened, right? There was a producer on that had a ton of success in social services, built it up to 900,000 in revenue. It was primarily driven by one or two individuals that were focused there. And then once it got to around $1 million, now you can have, if you're good with your carrier relationships, right, some program options open up for you, some different capabilities and underwriting open up for you. Your ability to staff that effectively opens up for you. And so that's where, and then once they had that, they were like, hey, there's a ton of this business around. It matches kind of what we're looking for. Let's go, and that, and so, and the value proposition that they would articulate is,
We know what you need better than anybody else does. We have these programs with these carriers. We have OSHA, like we have software that was built for nonprofits that would help them manage risk. They had libraries created through the different things that they would be able to go into. So we had a little one pager that you could email over and say, this is the deal, right? And it takes all of those together to kind of build that out, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's hard to be really good in any one thing when you're trying to be something to everyone.
Yep.
And you can't take that step back to truly say, what have we learned across this book of business that we can apply to other clients that look like this? But I think too many agencies, to your point, are still in that old mindset of, and I don't want to say old mindset, but certainly a mindset that might catch up to them, where we just hire producers and we let them build their book, and then they just kind of build it out. Whatever comes in the door, they sell it. We've got the service team ready to go and we service it and we do a good job. I mean, there's a lot of agencies out there that are doing well with that type of a model, but I think the ones that are really able to scale quickly, grow quickly, and frankly, bring more value to their client are those that, have identified, even if it's not in a true niche, but they've identified what is their value proposition that is different than their competitors that they can take to their market. And I just, I'd like your thoughts on how many, you're in a lot of different agencies anymore, and how many are that way versus,
No, I mean, I think if you look at the top agencies, they've definitely verticalized in that way. They've definitely said, hey, we are gonna build this, invest the capital and go after it. I think for smaller agencies, in a lot of cases, if their revenue, the problem is you have to pay the bills, right? You have to pay the bills. And so, in some cases, if you don't have the ability to turn down risk, you're so caught up in writing everything that just going after those very specific things is tough for the agency to give up that revenue as well. I mean, it's scary when you talk, if you're a smaller agency, 10 million under in revenue, you want to write whatever the hell you can. God, the last thing I want to do is turn down risk. It's very rare that I run into agencies that are like, we've identified an ideal client. We know where it fits. We're willing. This is what we do with clients that don't fit that. We have a kind of a soft offloading mechanism, a referral partner over there that we send that to, because you still have personal relationships to deal with, right? People are coming to you. They want Bob, the producer, knows Mary, the client that has a son that needs to be insured. You don't want to tick them off. But hey, he doesn't really fit our profile, but we have a great agency for you to call. I'm going to call over there, get them to hook you up. But you have to have those paths in place to be able to do that. And you have to have a culture that allows for that, right? If you're looking to get every dollar as soon as possible right now, and you've got to pay those bills, it's just like a desperate producer. I mean, a producer with a full pipeline that can say, it's not a great time for us to work together right now. I see that maybe you're not ready to adopt our style. I want to be a resource for you whenever you want to call me. When you run into a jam, hit me up. It's been great meeting with you, and I'll follow up with you in a couple months and see how things are. That person right there closes business because they have enough confidence to be able to turn that down instead of saying, oh no, we'll go to another carrier and we'll write lower rates. We'll figure something out, Yep. I like that person that can turn that down, that because that person's going to remember that, right? The salesperson and that person they're selling to is going to remember that.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, there's a lot of powerful things that can come out of that. Like you said, just the confidence and the ability of a full pipeline and the business that is cultivated the right way, or the prospects that are cultivated the right way. And when you've got a list of those, you're not hanging on to the one guy that you just got to land that right. Is going to be a pain in the ass. But I think part of it, sorry, real quick before we move on, is something that you just can't talk about enough, is the culture that allows your guys and gals to have a long enough runway to go hunt for the right business. Because Yeah, I don't know. We talk about this quite a bit, how the relationship business lengthens the sales cycle significantly. I don't know what the time frame is. I don't know how long it increases it, but it could very easily take it from a 30 to 90-day process to a few year process. And you got to be comfortable with that and support that at the company level.
Well, I think you have to have clear expectations too, right? You're not going to go in and write 150,000 revenue account generally in one meeting. That is a multi-year thing that you have to, so if you're a good producer, that means that you're, keying up prospects, in February 2 years before, and every month you're doing that. So 2 years from now, all that cultivation, because when they hit a spot where they're pissed off at their current agent or their whatever the service provider is, you want to be that person that's reached out quarterly, that's given them insight on their business, that's just created a touch point to say, here's an article I saw that is thinking about you, didn't know if this pertained to you, but thought you might be interested in it, right? It doesn't have to be, it shouldn't be sales pitchy. It should be literally helping them. So when they get jammed up, they can have that call and say, bro, I ran into something. Well, and that's how I've seen these guys really do it, but to your point, it is the large accounts take a hell of a lot longer to sell than small accounts do, right? If I'm a select account producer, I'm selling way more business at small levels, and those deals might be 60 days, 90 days, where anything about large revenue, large premium, that can be multiple years where you have to get them to fire their agent and show them a compelling reason why.
Yeah, and you got to have the full pipeline to be comfortable. I mean, if that's going to be a multi-year process, you better have started that multi-year process a couple of years ago. So you're closing some of those out while you're bringing new ones into the pipeline, and it's a continuous cycle. It's the age-old roller coaster of insurance sales, right? Where we get a bunch of opportunity, then we get really busy and closing that business we didn't prospect. So now we don't have any people in the pipeline. After we closed a bunch of that business, we got to go back out and prospect. You got to create those systems that can generate that pipeline consistently, which, it's all interconnected, right? If you have a better value prop, your pipeline's going to be more full, because you have a more compelling reason why people should listen to you. People should take a meeting with you.
Yeah, and if you have a value prop, it means you have an ideal client, right? Because you know what clients that value pertains to. And so those are kind of interlinked. Sometimes we create a value proposition without the ideal client. I like agencies that really invest a lot of time in ideal client, because I think the more business that they can turn down that's less profitable. I mean, clients that can turn down core personal lines or put them into service centers because they understand. I mean, like at Crichton, we had 4,000 accounts, maybe 5,000 accounts total. 2,500 of those were personal lines core, drove 5% of our revenue. So, I mean, 5% of our revenue on almost half of the overall client base, you've got to figure out how to scale that. You couldn't have 10 people on that, And so as that grew, we had to figure out, like, what do we do with this? This is not business that we really care about a ton, but it's business that we know if we can maintain it profitably, we will. So they use service centers. That was their answer for core personal lines and select accounts as well, small commercial.
What did you define at Crichton as core personal lines, and then like your small business?
So small commercial at Crichton was under 5,000 revenue, but that is a sliding scale based on size, right? I've seen plenty of agencies that have $1,000 delineator there, $2,500 delineator, and every agency handles it different, right? Some agencies are paying today on small commercial new and renewal percentage, and then they make a conversion where they're like, hey, you know what, now we're going to pay you a referral fee one time, referring into that. That's generally like the first sign of like operational and sales maturity that you see. They recognize that if I'm paying I've got to incentivize the behaviors that are going to drive results for both the producer and the firm. And if that producer's making a living on small commercial, they're never going to scale. They produce, it's going to be very challenging for them to get $1 million book, $1.2 million book of business, And so that was the delineator there. Core personal lines, a little more complicated because it wasn't specifically a delineator on revenue or premium. It was more, who are they connected to? Obviously, they have two houses, fancy cars, that all went to high net worth. If it's me, I'm calling my agency saying I've got a Durango and one house and, 2 kids and we're not, here's the markets that you can go to. Here's where we took you to, do you like this? It really was kind of quote and pray. There's not a lot of consultation on that side because you can't touch them for very long. But I think each agency, depending on, because we also had employee benefits and kind of a small employee benefits department that was under 50 lives, right? And so each one of those for each agency, I've seen it handled probably 100 different ways. I mean, I don't know that there's a right or a wrong. I have my own opinions about how we should incentivize, that growth, but everybody kind of has to figure out where they are right now in the maturity level to make it work.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's hard to adjust compensation. I mean, that's when you try to, like, I was talking to a firm today, they pay 60% new, 40% renewal. And I'm just like, bro, what are you doing? But it's because they do all the service. They don't have any tools for the producers, right? So every bit of it is on the producer to renew, to retain. And that's not, I mean, you can do that, but you see a hub doesn't have to pay that much because they have a ton of tools for their producers to help them sell business, right?
Yeah.
So it's much more attractive. I'm a new producer, go to hub where they have a whole onslaught of data and tools and benchmarks and things I can use to sell into verticals in different areas. And so now I can pay 25% new and 15% on renewal because I can make you way more successful and your core competency is to go and hunt and kill,
Well, and I think that's the beauty of our industry, right? Where there's so many different ways to skin the cat. There's so many different ways to provide value to clients that you don't have to do the same things that another firm does. It's so interesting to me, you and I were just out at the Better Conference and to hear firms that are building their firms completely different than the way that we are. I mean, there was, Andy Matheson talked from Glovebox, talked about how he grew their $3 million family agency premium to $100 million premium personal lines firm, doing just personal lines.
Right.
That's completely outside of my bailiwick to figure out how to do. It was super intriguing to learn how they did it. They figured out how they could provide value, what they could do, and where they fit into the value chain for a client. And it's super great message to think about that if we can just sit down and we can build that value prop for a particular set of prospects, there's plenty of them out there and there's plenty of problems to solve, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But I think it's like you said, it's being strategic. And I think Ryan had a great point about, you can't be in a hustle bustle corporate culture and just constantly be inundated with stuff and go do this, go do that. And at the same time, be super strategic and figure out that you're going to have to slow down to speed up. And it's funny, as I've been with firms, as we've learned those lessons, as a producer taking leadership of a new agency and then understanding the difference between being a producer in an agency and leading the agency, and then the professional development that individual had to do to become the leader that was needed, that was different than a producer, And so I think that it's the culture of it really is the underlying linchpin. You can talk to your blue in the face about, I want to do all this stuff, but if it's all about when's your next close, what's going on, all this external pressure, and not so much about how are you providing value to that prospect base, how is the firm articulating that, what can we do to help you build that messaging out, and we understand this process may be a little slower than, because a lot of times people talk about stuff, right? They just talk and they don't really ever want to execute on it, and it's not that hard to start doing some of this stuff, but you really got to start fundamentally changing.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, that's.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, no, that's 100% spot on.
I like being 100% spot on, Ryan. That happens very rarely.
What's the alternative, Ryan? I mean, yes.
So I want to make sure we, we're coming up on time. Is there anything, that you've kind of seen out there or even what you've been experiencing, what you guys are doing at Ennabl, things like that you want to make sure we kind of get out to everybody and talk through before we close up?
I mean, we didn't really touch on it at all because I think that it's more of a side kind of addition to these initiatives. But I definitely think one of the things that freaks me out a lot is large agencies have been doing this stuff for 10, 15 years now, right? Like they have spent millions of dollars on figuring out how to use data to understand and identify target client, value proposition, all this different stuff. And, it does cause me a bit of strategic concern for independent agents in that space, or any service provider that's not really fundamentally digging into data and looking at what is it, because it's not one of those things that you just start with, right? It's like, hey, here's data, now I just know how to use it. And I think sometimes it's pitched like that, like, yeah, once you get access to data, just turn the faucet on and money just will come flowing.
Yeah.
And it's not at all.
Takes work, right?
It's work initially to change your thought process from intuition and gut feeling to understand, because when you look at it, I see this data, where is it versus where I think it should be? What are the actions needed to move it in the direction that I want it to? How do I then come back and test to see if those actions had a result? And that is where we are falling down as an industry. And I think at a level, because there's so few individuals that have the patience and the tenacity to be able to do that, that truly small organizations are at a tremendous disadvantage when it comes to that, because we have to. I mean, you look at the consumer that's coming forward, all these guys are Instagram and Facebook and Snapchat junkies. They're looking at analytics every day. You think they don't know their view count, their like count? So these younger generations are so in tune with analytics that if we don't get with it, if we don't figure that out, I mean, and so I would say that as you're looking at service, as you're looking at advising, always think about what's the data that I can use to help justify and quantify the impact that we're going to have with that client in these initiatives.
Exactly. Yeah. And
Awesome.
if you have not learned about or reached out to Ryan and Ennabl to get insight into a lot of that data, I would highly encourage you to do so. It's an impressive product. And it also brings something that you didn't touch on. It brings data from all the systems you're using into one spot, which, as we all know in the insurance industry, is very difficult to get our systems to communicate to any sort of degree. And so if we can at least compile the data in one spot, we can use that data to make much more effective decisions in our companies to drive everything that we're talking about today. So certainly reach out, you gave them your contact information earlier, but we'll share it as well. And
yeah, and I love to talk to people about data. I mean, I don't care what industry. There's many times when I've got on Zoom and talked about data outside the insurance industry. I think, from my perspective, Ennabl does one thing. It accelerates your ability to learn how to use data and really start working on it effectively. I mean, that's our main pitch. And so, if you're in the insurance agency space and you have data questions, give me a holler. And if you're in the world and you have data questions, give me a holler. I love to talk about it.
There you go. All right, man.
Awesome, Ryan.
Thanks for coming
Thanks,
on.
guys.
Thanks for coming on, man. Yeah.
Glad to be here. Glad to meet another Ryan. A
That's
better
right.
looking Ryan. But I'm glad to meet you. I am intimidated, but I'm glad to meet you.
Oh, dude, no, I'm intimidated. I do not have the name of my company tattooed on both arms.
That's right. Most people don't, and it's a mixed bag on the reactions I get from that. Some people are like, I see them and they're like thinking about when I'm 60 and they're just like, oh, regret.
Regrets, no regrets.
Like you could just see that in their eyes.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this dumb bastard right here. And some people I get big ass hugs from, like, man, you're bought in, So it's,
yeah.
But it's definitely a conversation starter. That's for sure.
Yeah. No, I love it. And nothing like being all in, and so.
Awesome. Well,
Thanks,
man.
guys. I appreciate it.
Yep. Have a good one.
Thank you for tuning in to Getting Past the Premium. We are excited to continue breaking down barriers and finding solutions together. If you would like to reach out regarding anything you heard in today's episode, find links and contact info in the description. Until next time, have a great day, and let's continue getting past the premium.